Okay guys, chapter 8. The sons of Ham and his descendants in Western Europe, prophecy against the Isles, and the retrospect of Habakkuk. The evidence that the children of Noah dwelt together before the division in the time of Peleg is sufficient to warrant our looking for traces of this son of Noah in the countries of Gomer's posterity. Ham is described as the father of Canaan. The word Ham, which abounds in the British Islands in the name of localities and families, almost identifies the islands of the sea as a portion of the Hamath of Isaiah. The city of Hamonah in the valley of Hamon, Gog, with which it is mentioned in Ezekiel, was situated in these islands. The word Gog is associated with the places in Britain. Hamon Gog, interpreted through the Welsh, means literally Northampton. Gog means north, and Ham bears its own signification. According to some of the old maps, an example of which is appended to Dr. Skeen's edition of the Four Ancient Books of Wales, Prydain ye Gogledd means the northern division of Britain. The north of England, including the lowlands of Scotland, was at one time in possession of the Welsh, which may account for this distinction being preserved. Northmen are called Gwr ye Gogledd, or the men of the north, so the Norwegian, Norseman and Norman, the latter name being given to the men of the north of France who went there under Rollo the Dane. In some parts of England, the word Ham is yet preserved by itself. Ham in Glamorganshire, and East and West Ham near London. Again, we have North and South Hampton, Hampstead in Staffordshire, Hampton near London, and names of people, Ham, Hampson, Hammon, Hammond, Hamich, and perhaps Hamilton. Ham was the father of Canaan. A place derived of this name is Cana, one of the islands of the Hebrides, perhaps the Cannae of Ezekiel. I've been looking at this island as well, in the Western Isles. I thought it resembled Canaan, Cana. Mentioned in connection with Eden and Haram. So what was that? Perhaps the Cannae of Ezekiel, mentioned in connection with Eden and Haram. Cain Mor, a mountain in North Wales, seems to have retained the name, as the names of people there are many: Cain, Keen, Cain, Duquesne, and Can. The son of Canaan was Cush. There are some who believe that there are traces of Cush in Ireland. The supposed Cuthite remains there are considered by antiquaries to be one of great importance towards the elucidation of great prehistoric people. Cushandal and Cushenden, both in Ireland, are with Midian or Midian, spoke of in Habakkuk, and they are to be identified as the Cushan and Midian of Habakkuk. Cushandal is in the neighbourhood of the Akkads. The old name for Meath, according to Irish authorities, was Mead or Midian. Cushandal is situated near Meath, but may not have been a part of the old Meath province of Ireland. Teman, Temora, may have also been situated there. In connection with the Cush, we now refer more generally to Ireland. Inspirational utterances in the forms of visions of the past, as well as prophecies, distinguish Ezekiel, Isaiah, and Habakkuk. The prophecies were not more remarkable than the retrospections. The words of Habakkuk are an example of retrospect. The prophecies against the isles had been fulfilled, and he sublimely says, God came from Teman, and the Holy One from Mount Paran, Selah. His glory covered the heavens, and earth was full of his praise. And his brightness was as the light. He had horns coming out of his hand, and there was the hiding of his power. Before him went the pestilence, and burning coals went forth at his feet. He stood and measured the earth. He beheld and drove asunder the nations, and the everlasting mountains were scattered. The perpetual hills did bow. His ways are everlasting. I saw the tents of Cushan in affliction, and the curtains of the land of the Midian did tremble. Was the Lord displeased against the rivers? Was thine anger against the rivers? Was thy wrath against the sea, that thou didst ride upon thine horses and thy chariots of salvation? Thy bow was made quite naked, according to the oaths of the tribes, even thy word, Selah. Thou didst cleave the earth with rivers. The mountains saw thee, and they trembled. The overflowing of the water passed by. The deep uttered his voice and lifted up his hands on high. The sun and the moon stood still in their habitation. At the light of thine arrows they went, and at the shining of thy glittering spear. Thou didst march through the land in indignation. Thou didst thresh the heathen in anger. We have quoted Habakkuk to this length because there is much more in his words than the sublime. Geologists speak of disturbed formations, for they find the primitive rocks uppermost, and the great mystery of the formation of the Irish bog has never yet been solved. Vast deposits, miles in extent, of dark vegetable and animal matter, containing forests of oak and other trees with burnt, charred roots, many in a horizontal position, which seem to tell of the fire of the Lord, and remind us of the burning coals that went forth at his feet. Strange bones of men and animals, oak canoes, jewels bearing strange characters, gold and silver ornaments in great quantity are found in these deposits, and assure us of a great earthquake having occurred there. The Loughs, the mountains, the great caves of which Fingal's is but one, tell us of a convulsion which the Scripture records treat over and over again. The Bible reminds us of several earthquakes. One of the most remarkable is that which in the 27th year of Uzziah, king of Judah, BC 787, Zechariah and Amos speak of it. It is recorded in the Annals of Ulster that an earthquake at one time overthrew over 56 of the round towers. Drove us under the nation, says Habakkuk. May it not be that the allusion here is to the British Islands, cut from the continent of Europe. Look at the map of Europe, and while remembering the kindred races of the French, Spanish, Old British, Welsh, Irish, and the Erse, and the antiquities of each, it is impossible but to be struck with the words of the prophet. Was thine anger against the rivers? Was thy wrath against the sea? These words that follow the description of Cushan and affliction, and the trembling of the land of Midian. Who can say that they were not intended to describe the separation of Great Britain and Ireland from the mainland of the continent by the interposition of the river and the sea? And this is what I've been looking into as well, funnily enough, guys. The Doggerland. There was a piece of land connecting Britain with France, and there was a massive tsunami that was caused by a piece of ice, I think it was, breaking off near Norway. I can't remember what it was called, the Savald Plate or something, or the Savald Slide, and it caused a great tsunami, and this covered up Doggerland, and it created Britain as an island. This might have not been known at this time in this book, back in 1873, but this is what I think they're talking about. Alaphon, the sons of Brewley, was a very kind king in a word and action, and also a bard of transcendent compositions. A tremendous earthquake occurred in his time, until the mountains and rocks were rent, and the rivers, being diverted from their beds, ran through the chasms of the ground. This is a paragraph from the Iolo MSS, and the note upon the earthquake mentioned in it subjoined. Cambro-British traditionary records commemorate many violent convulsions of the earth that seem to have occurred too far back in antiquity to admit of any chronological computation of their real periods. Still, other testimonies, aided by natural appearances and geological comparisons, frequently tend to verify those immemorial events. Druidical mythology says that the Almighty, when neither life nor being existed save himself, vocalized his name, and consequently that all animated nature sprang simultaneously to light and life at the ineffably melodious sound, thus transmitting to futurity a magnificent reference to the creation. The awful bursting of the lake of floods that deluged the world and drowned all living things except Dwifan and Dwifak, the man and woman of God, who escaped in the bald ship, and by their offspring repeopled the world, is another recorded tradition of the deluge, which is sustained by an additional Celtic version of that event that probably appertained to the Aborigines of the island, for among the three arduous works of the island of Britain is named the ship of Nephid, Lord of Lords, that carried it, a male and female of every living creature, when the lake of floods burst, the 97th triad. The mighty occurrences thus recorded would probably have only been retained as the imaginings of erratic genius, were they not elucidated by the Mosaic accounts independently of the mythologies in varied forms, or perhaps all other nations, kindreds, and tongues of the earth. In nearer association with the effects of the earthquake, attributed in the text to the rain, may be quoted the 67th triad, the three subordinate islands of the island of Britain, the island of Orkney, Ork, the Isle of Man, and the Isle of Wight. Afterwards, the land was so rent by the sea that Mon, Anglesey, became an island, and in the same manner Orkney was rent into a multitude of islands, and other parts of Alban, Scotland, and Cabrin became islands. The testimony of this triad is supported by Mark, the hermit's copy of Nennius, where the following passage occurs: Tres magnas insulas habet, quarum ona Australis verget contra Amoricas et vocator insula Gurth. Secunda sista est in umbilico maras inter Hibernium et Britanniam et nominatur Ibonia vel manal. Tertia est in extremo boreali limit orbis Britanniae ultra pictos et vocator orc. Britain has three great islands, one towards the south, opposite the Armorican shore, called Wight, the second situated mid-sea between Ireland and Britain, called Eubonia or Man, and the third to the extreme north of the British boundary beyond the Picts, named Orkney. An ancient proverb, quoted by the same venerable author, as applicable to the rule of the paramount monarchs of the island, affords further corroboration. Judicavit Britanniam cum tribus insulis. He ruled over Britain and its three islands. From the construction of the foregoing triad, it is pretty clear that its latter clause is merely a commentary appended by some remote transcriber to account for the altered appearance of the Orkneys after the rupture, and we may fairly conclude also that the triads were among the ancient traditions and ancient books from which Nennius professes to have drawn his information. Ex traditionem veterum ex antiquis libris nostrorum. The third triad of the Hengwart series gives, like the facsimile prefix to the Gunn's translation of the Historia, 28 as the number of ancient British cities, although some of the names vary in these records. Different copies, however, have extended the number to 33 and 35. The extraordinary bed of the Avon from Bristol to the Severn is evidently as an immense cleft formed by some tremendous convulsion, and Caer Adornant, the city of Rift River, the Welsh name of that ancient city, seems to support the hypothesis. Whether this rupture was produced by an earthquake, similar to that recorded in the text, or by volcanic eruption, cannot now be determined further than that the agency of the latter may be rationally inferred from the proximity of Brandon Hill to it. I am informed by persons who have examined the district that the original course of the Avon through Somersetshire from Nailsea near Bristol to its confluence with the Severn at Clavedon may still be traced. The above is appended to the genealogy of Leston, the son of Gwergyn, Prince of Glamorgan, together with a short account of the accomplishments and achievements of the several princes it includes in the Iolo manuscripts. The Psalms, as well as the books of the prophets, are full of allusions to the great convulsion accompanied by fire, a great shaking in the land of Israel, and the fire of the Lord may be understood as the disturbed formations, volcanic actions of the modern geologist. The Quran refers to inhabitants of the wood near Median as having been destroyed, and of lofty towers that were thrown down. The Median referred to it as to be distinguished from the Midian by the Red Sea, which we first hear of as in existence in the time of Abraham, most likely named after Midian, the son of Keturah. Midian, as we understand it, was the land of Midianite merchantmen who carried tin from Cornwall to Phoenicia and to other parts of the east. And this is where the story of Joseph coming to Britain. He was a trader in tin. And the Glastonbury stories come from. These Midianites, in company with Ishmaelites, are described in Genesis as coming from Gilead, with their camels and bearing spicery and balm and myrrh to Egypt, probably influenced to do so from the family relationship that existed between them. For the brothers of Cush were Mizraim, Phut, and Canaan. Egypt was the land of Mizraim, and Phut and Canaan are considered to have been nearly intermediate places. The supposed Cuthite remains at Cashel bear striking resemblance to some of the Ninevite sculptures. Nergal, or Nimrod, the winged lion, as exhibited in the British Museum, is a remarkable imitation of the winged lion of Cashel. The purpose of our remarks upon the sons of Ham and their descendants in Western Europe is not to prove that the genesis of things was with them there more than with the sons of Japhet, and to an extent the sons of Shem. In fact, all that we have advanced about them goes only as far as to show that they were in Europe, and left their marks there before going to the East, taking with them the ideas that developed monuments akin to those of the land of the cradle of their race. The Egyptian, Indian, and Arab monuments have their Celtic art affinities, just as the people of Egypt, India, and Arabia have Celtic relationship of speech. The principal characteristics of the ancient Irish style of architecture is observed in the architecture of these countries, viz., massive stones laid in irregular courses, and doorways having sloping or inclining jambs. Right guys, that's the end of that chapter. I'll see you in the next one. We're getting through them tonight. Cheers. Okay guys, chapter 7. Cush and Nimrod. The most influential and celebrated of the sons of Cush was Nimrod, the mighty hunter before the Lord. The beginning of those kingdoms was Babel, Erech, Akkad, and Calneh. We have reserved from the order of our remarks upon the three latter places reference to Babel until we treated of it in connection with Cush and Nimrod. There can be no doubt that to Semiramis was attributed a good deal of what was actually accomplished by Ninus. The testimony of the Megasthenes, as preserved by Abydenus of Tyre, goes to show us that it was by Belus Babylon was surrounded with a wall, although some have represented that it was Semiramis alone. This Belus may be distinguished from Bel, who began the city and tower of Babel, for the reason that we are told Bel had to leave both unfinished. If so, he could not have surrounded the city with a wall. We may suppose that Ninus, as the son of Cush, inherited his father's title of Bel, or the confounder. The explanation then is that Ninus, or Nimrod, for he is called both names indifferently, was the first to consolidate the Babylonian Empire, and that he, like his father Cush, who must have left among the first Babylonians, the impression of his greatness, was deified. Bel, which word afterwards in most languages of Europe took the form of Belus. According to Layard, Rea, or Cabelli, the tower crowned goddess and god of fortification was a Babylonian goddess, and the counterpart of the deity presiding over bulwarks and fortresses. Consequently, she originated with the mystical Semiramis, supposed queen of Nimrod or Ninus. Oh my god, people, I've been looking into her as well. Kibele, the old Anatolian goddess. To us, it is almost unnecessary in the present confused state of the question as to Semiramis being the wife of Ninus or Nimrod, and especially as we have only proposed to treat of certain parts of the subject in this work, to offer any contribution towards the solution of the difficulty. However, as far as we can judge, it is quite possible that Semiramis was the mother, not wife of Nimrod or Ninus, and therefore the wife of Bel or Cush. The first remains of this Bel are to be found in the tradition, Druidic religion, mythology, stone monuments, etc. of Europe. Kronos, or Saturn, was Rhea's husband. Traced back to the original, we find that Kronos was no other than the first king of Babylon, worshipped under the names of Bel and Baal. In the genuine copies of Eusebius, there is no mention made of any Belus, actual king of Assyria, before Ninus. So, according to that authority, Kronos or Saturn was not only Cush, Bel or Baal, but Ninus or Nimrod. Under the name Kronos, Nimrod is known as king of the Cyclops, who were his brethren and the inventors of the tower building. What may be in a general way deduced from the foregoing is that, notwithstanding the different names under which Nimrod is represented, he inherited some of the nature and attributes of Bel or Cush, the co-founder, which entitled him to be deified as his father was, and that he completed the tower and city of Babel, commenced by his father, who, if he conceived the building of the city and tower, may be fairly accredited with originating tower building, the invention of which is sometimes attributed to Nimrod. This may throw some light upon what are called the Cuthite remains in Ireland, the round towers, etc. of that country. In Scotland we have things called brocks, like towers. There were stone towers called brocks, which are probably the same thing. Well, that was a quick chapter. Right, people, see you in the next one.